RadioNOW 100.9's Indy Connection with Emily Metheny.
Hello, I'm Emily Metheny, your host. This week, I continued my conversation with David Berman, Vice President of Harm Reduction and Crisis Stabilization Services with Mental Health America of Indiana. We talked about reducing stigma surrounding mental health, doing intentional self-care, finding resources, and much more. So, David, we're starting to come out of the pandemic and things are starting to open up. What does that kind of look like from a mental health perspective as things are starting to kind of go back to normal, but it's still not normal?
Well, we know that the ramifications from a mental health side are going to far outlast the physical side of the pandemic. So that's no surprise at all. One of the issues I think that we're all watching is what it looks like for people to reacclimate going back out in public. There was a lot of fear. There was a lot of apprehension. We're starting to see some numbers spike again as far as hospitalization goes. There is uncertainties about the vaccine, whether it's okay to get it at all, much less its efficacy in the long term. And so there are a lot of fears out there. There's a lot of continued anxiety. Added to the fact that, for example, the workplace, we have all kind of gotten into our routine now. And, for me, I can, on certain days, have pillow marks on my face and be in front of my computer working within about 7 minutes. And so we're into our routines. We kind of have our own rituals at home. What is it going to be like when we have to integrate back with people in the workplace? Are we all of a sudden going to be oversensitive to the way people walk or the sound of their voice or the little habits that they have that conflict with the way that we've developed our routine? And then there's just the getting back into public. Again, we currently in Indiana have no mandate for social distancing, for masks, for any of that stuff. It's on a county level or then an individual establishment level. And I think we've all seen one end of the spectrum to the other. And so you have people that are not wearing masks, that are not social distancing, that are also interacting in similar spaces with people that are. And so there's a lot of fear there as well. And so I think when you look at the pandemic in general, kind of from start to whenever the finish is, there's a lot of uncertainty. I mean, that is probably one of the best words, I think, to describe the pandemic in general. So there's uncertainty to the efficacy of the vaccine. There's uncertainty as to when everything is going to end. There's uncertainty as to the mutations and what that's going to look like. There's uncertainty to reintegrating in society and reintegrating with people that have socially distanced for a very long time. So I think it's going to be interesting. There's really no good model to look at to kind of project what to expect. So the next several months are going to be very telling.
Mm-hmm. And with people, as they're starting to go out, all the restrictions are lifting, and they do have those concerns, that fear, anxiety. What can they be doing to help themselves?
Well, I always like to talk about the things that we have control of and the things we don't have control of. So we do not have control over how other people are acting in public, whether they're wearing masks, whether they're socially distancing. We have no control over that, but we have control over our own behaviors and actions. So we can wear masks. We can socially distance and step away from individuals, I think, without fear of there being some sort of social faux pas, because everybody kind of understands at this point. We can focus on the things that are important to us and do the activities that are meaningful to us and take control of our life and our thoughts and the way that we feel, and just kind of ignore all of those things that we cannot control, or turn them around into situations where we can control them, again, by wearing our mask, by making sure we socially distance, by staying out of situations where we may feel uncomfortable.
Because we are coming to the end of April, we're actually coming to May, which is Mental Health Month. Can you tell us a little bit about the idea of having a month dedicated to raising awareness about mental health?
Well, in the best of years, mental health needs to be on the forefront of people's minds. It's not something we talk about. And when we do talk about it, we typically look at the negative side, mental illness, as opposed to mental health, mental wellness. We have physical health. We do things to take care of ourselves physically. We get sleep. We eat the right way. We exercise. We get checkups. It's the same thing with your mental health. I mean, a lot of those things that we're doing on the physical side directly affect our mental health, like sleep, like eating healthy, like exercising, like giving ourselves checkups, mental checkups, self checks. And we need to talk about this more. We need to eradicate the stigma. We need to look at things from the perspective of vulnerability as opposed to weakness. Being human means being vulnerable. It doesn't mean that we're weak. And it's important to bring to light all of these issues, really bring them out into the open and start talking about them. And having a whole month dedicated to this, I think, is super important. This year, more so than ever, coming out of the pandemic, and we will basically, in Indiana anyway, be approximately 1 year. I mean, if you look at really things starting to ramp up, it was April 1st, I feel like, even though I feel like a lot of people here, it was more the middle of March when things started to hit from a physical health standpoint. It was really April 1st, I think, where things really hit home. So we're coming into a year of having lived with a pandemic, and the numbers that we have seen from individuals who have concern about their mental health, about anxiety, about depression. I just saw that the CDC's pulse on the country looking at anxiety and depression for Indiana alone, as of 2 weeks ago, 32% of adults said they were experiencing depression or severe anxiety. And when I look at numbers related to kids, youth 11 to 24, and some of the statistics that we're seeing, there are increases of 500 to 600% of youth that are in that pre-suicide risk range of having moderate to severe symptoms of anxiety or depression or symptoms related to bipolar disorder when compared to the 2019-2020 year. And so you see these numbers, and I think, you know, whether it's in Indiana, whether it's across the country, we are all appalled and we're terrified by what we're seeing. And so going into May this year, where we're talking about mental health after what we've seen for the last year, I think is that much more important.
Mm-hmm. And if people want to start that conversation, to start talking about their mental health with family, or even with, let's start with their family, how can they start that conversation?
I think really just being open and honest, whether, you know, you're adults talking to adults, whether you're talking to your teenage kids, whether it's the kids talking to you, just being open and honest and sharing your feelings. I mean, as we were talking earlier, stigma is such a major issue and is probably the biggest barrier for individuals with mental health or substance use issues accessing treatment. It's the same thing as far as having conversations. And so that trust needs to be there. You know, the easiest way, I think, within your family to start talking about mental health issues is really to have established that trust factor in advance. Most people are not going to allow themselves to feel vulnerable, whether it's with close family or friends or whether it's with strangers, unless they know that that vulnerability is not going to be taken advantage of, and that it's a safe place for them to talk about how they feel and what's going on in their lives. And so really you need to establish that trust issue, that trust factor, I think, before you start having the conversations. But what I think winds up happening, when you look at numbers, approximately 50% or so of our adult population will have symptoms related to some sort of mental health disorder in their lifetime. And that being said, mental illness, substance use disorders, suicidal ideation, maybe suicide attempts, or even death by suicide affects every single one of us. Each of us knows somebody that is close to us, whether we know it or not, that is directly affected, whether they've been diagnosed, whether they should be diagnosed, whether they attempted suicide, whether they thought about suicide, whether we know it or not, we all are affected. We all know someone. And so what you see happening is you start talking about it openly, and then others start to join the conversation. So, I think the answer to your question, again, is just be open and honest. And, assuming that trust factor is there, most of the time, the way that we look at ourselves is based on the fears that we have, whether it be our sexual preference or whether it be things that we're going through from a mental health standpoint or an addiction standpoint. And that we view ourselves, we judge ourselves much more harshly sometimes than other people do us. And it's all fear-based. And so that's kind of the other piece, is just letting go of your fears and trusting.
Because we do have people in our lives, even if we don't realize it, how can we change how we talk, even just in general, just in a general conversation? How can we be more inclusive, kind of showing that, not showing, but being more sensitive to what someone else might be going through, even if we don't know? How do we start changing how we talk?
So one of the easiest ways to stigmatize is by language. And there are many words that I think we all grew up with hearing, whether it be through media or television, movies, that depict many social issues in a negative light, or use words that have a negative connotation. So within mental health, for example, we don't say committed suicide. We say died by suicide. The word committed has a negative connotation. Individuals commit crimes or they get committed to a psychiatric facility. Sure, committed means to be dedicated to a situation. But when someone says committed suicide, there's always this negative connotation. So we don't use the word committed. We don't say someone is bipolar or someone, for example, that's a good one. Someone is bipolar. They have bipolar disorder. We don't define ourselves by what we may have. We wouldn't say, I am cancer or I'm diabetes. I have this. It's not my fault. It's genetic. And it's a disease. Same thing with mental health disorders. So I would recommend, and there's a number of websites, if you Google correct language to use when talking about mental health or mental health stigmatizing words or any combination, because Google, of course, will recognize anything that we put in there. You'll find tons and tons of information and sites that have kind of the stigmatizing words, the words that we used to use, and the new words that we should use. And again, language is the easiest way to perpetuate stigma. And sometimes just, as you were saying, inclusive, sometimes just using the words that make people feel included by humanizing mental health and substance use. It reduces the stigma right then and there, just by changing those words.
What else can we be doing outside of how we use our words? Would listening be, not just to respond, be a good way to be there for somebody?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, active listening, I think, is important in any situation. I don't care what it is. I don't care if we're talking to our kids about something random or coworkers or friends. When we have conversations, 90% of the time, we are half listening, but really thinking about how we want to respond, as opposed to actively listening, giving 100% of our attention to the individual that's speaking, hearing what they're saying, trying to comprehend what they're saying, clarifying if we don't understand, as opposed to thinking of our rebuttal or our response. And so sometimes, yeah, that's the absolute best way. When someone is telling you a story about them that's very personal, where they're feeling vulnerable, it may take them a while to get there, may take them a very long time. And the best thing we can do is just sit there, keep quiet, actively listen, hear what they're saying, try to understand what it is that they're feeling, rather than start thinking about our response in our head. Another really important thing we need to do, this is, as far as Mental Health Month goes and what we should be aware of, which is sort of the opposite side of the coin, is taking care of ourselves, making sure that we have self-care in our lives, that we're doing things that make us feel good, that we're avoiding behaviors that we know are not healthy, that we're trying to sleep in a normal fashion, that we are, when we're working from home, have work routines, that we have boundaries, exercising, eating right. All of these things, as far as taking care of ourselves, are preeminent before we can start trying to take care of each other, whether it be, our children, whether it be our family, our friends. I am one who definitely subscribes to the oxygen mask theory, where you look at a situation in the plane where the oxygen masks fall. They always say, put your mask on first before you do so for your children or anyone else. It's the same thing, I think, as far as mental health goes, mental wellness. If we're not focused on our mental wellness, if we're not in a place where we feel mentally healthy, it's very difficult to help individuals that are in a place where they're not feeling mentally healthy. And so self-care is super, super important, and should be a focus area, I think, over the next month.
And that could be as simple as just doing what you enjoy and just giving yourself time to enjoy it.
Absolutely. Going for a walk, exercising, watching TV, whatever it may be. The interesting thing about self-care is it's all about intentionality, being intentional about the things that we do to take care of ourselves. A lot of times we do things, good and bad, that are just unconscious behaviors. They're part of our routine, and we don't think twice about it. And when you really start to be intentional, about how you're feeling, kind of that name it to tame it philosophy, recognize what you're feeling, and that's really the first step. Recognizing, understanding what you're feeling, what it is that you need, and then what the things are you're going to do to take care of yourself. Really transition those unconscious behaviors to intentional conscious behaviors. Even if you're doing the same thing, going for a walk, it's just part of your routine. You just kind of do it. You think you're doing it maybe for exercise. When you become aware and it's an intentional action for self-care, for your mental health, the same behavior, the same action has more meaning. And so I think, again, intentionality and being aware of how we're feeling, the things that we're doing, really can change our outlook in and of itself, even if we're not doing something different.
That is amazing, David, because I don't think we ever really slow down to be intentional, especially with ourselves.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. We just do what we do, and we are creatures of habit and routine, and we don't necessarily think about it. And there's so many simple things we can do. Again, even outside of those unconscious routine behaviors, there's so many simple things we can do that will totally change our outlook. Like breathing. We don't think about breathing, but there are all sorts of super simple 30-second breathing techniques that will literally take you from a heightened anxiety state to a much more calm state. Or little things like standing up, walking around our home office, or just going outside and smelling the fresh air, or scented candles, different things like that that are so simple to do that make a world of difference.
And as we go through May, through Mental Health Month, what will Mental Health America of Indiana be doing, and where can people follow along?
So we have a number of different opportunities to follow along. We have a website, obviously, MHAI.net. We have a Facebook page, we have a Twitter account, and we recommend, or we encourage as many followers as possible. And any activities or any events, or whether it's a planned or after the fact interview or media spot or activity or information, you'll find typically on our Facebook page or on our website. And we have and are using a Mental Health Awareness Month toolkit that is part of our Mental Health America national affiliate, the parent organization, that is really, really great stuff. You can download it on Mental Health America National's website. We can send it to you. I believe there's also a link for it on our website with really great tools for self-care, for stigma reduction, for having conversations with kids, stats and figures, and all sorts of social media posts and graphics that you can use for for yourself, through your company, your organization, personally. And then we at Mental Health America of Indiana are just going to be participating in a lot of different events that have been generated by other entities. This is an interesting time. We have been working remotely since March 16th of 2020. We are still all working remotely. So we are really, really limiting anything that we're doing in person. And so any activity that we have generated, or we are generating right now, is virtual, whether it be webinars, whether it be trainings, whether it be conferences. So this is going to be a very different Mental Health Awareness Month. And I wish I could say we have all of these activities planned, but we're going to be more reactionary in many ways, participating in a lot of stuff, potentially doing some last minute things that are going to be virtual. But this is a very different year this year.
Mm-hmm. And David, as we start to wrap up, what else would you want people to walk away with from our conversation today? Or what would you like to hit on one more time?
That stigma is a massive barrier for all of us, whether it's mental health related, whether it's sexual assault related, whether it's domestic violence related. We feel shame for all of these things that are not our fault. And again, we are all vulnerable. That doesn't make us weak. And we need to stop shaming ourselves and each other for the things that happen to us, the things that we go through in our lives, and focus on our resiliency and strength and building each other up. And then self-care. Take care of yourselves, because it's so much more difficult to take care of others until you've taken care of yourself. And then I think, as we've talked about in depth today, active listening. Take the time to listen. Take the time to care. We walk down our streets and we walk down hallways at work or kids at school, and we say, "Hey, how are you doing?" And we keep walking. "Hey, how are you doing?" is a verbal wave. That's all that it is. We need to stop and take the time to find out how people are doing, and actively listen. Really, really listen to what it is that they're saying, rather than just verbally wave and keep going.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And David, what resources can people check out to learn more about mental health, about mental illness, and about self-care? What resources are available to them?
There are a ton of different resources available. Mental Health America National has a ton of stuff on their website, really, really good stuff, including a self-screening tool for about 10 different things that individuals may be experiencing. It's been recognized as probably the best online self-screening tool in the country. And it looks at everything from anxiety and depression to postpartum depression and PTSD and bipolar disorder. And you can kind of look at what may be the best test for you to take based on what you're feeling. It will give you a score. It will lead you to a resource page that first talks about how you can have conversations. What does this mean? What is stigma? How do I tell somebody? What should I do? To then another resource page where you can actually find treatment and and peer support in different ways that you can take care of yourself, whether they're traditional or non-traditional. And then there's other things like Active Minds or the Be Well Indiana website. That is the state of Indiana's website, has a ton of great stuff related to mental health, to substance use disorders, to how we're feeling, to self-care. Really, really good stuff there. And then if people are looking for resources in general, I think the easiest way, Indiana local resources, is to call 211. 211 has a huge repository of everything behavioral health oriented, as well as community-based resources that you can need, from therapists, mental health and addiction providers, to 12-step meetings, to housing aid and food pantries. And then through 211, we also have the Be Well Crisis Helpline, which is free, 24/7, completely anonymous way for individuals to talk to a caring, listening ear, trained crisis counselor about what they may be feeling. So there's a ton of stuff out there. Again, Google knows it all. You put in any number of keywords, and anything you would want would come up. But I think the ones that I would most recommend is the Mental Health American National Self-Screening Tool and resources there, the Toolkit, the Be Well Indiana website. I, again, love Active Minds, and then just using 211 as a resource, including the Be Well Crisis Helpline.
Excellent. Thank you, David.
You're very welcome.
For more resources and more conversations about mental health, visit our mental health tab or search Indy's Connection on our website at RadioNOWindy.com. Thank you for listening, and if you have any questions, comments, or topics you would like to hear more about, email me at emetheny, that's EMETHENY at radio-one.com, or you can follow me on Twitter at EmilyDoesVideo. Until then, have a great week.
Radio Now 100.9's Indy Connection with Emily Metheny.